don't think I can ever fall in love with a black woman, Kim Jae-hoon said as he stood across Ti-woo, his oldest mutual friend. Beside Jae-hoon, sipping her glass of sparkling water with the quiet stillness of a woman who had mastered the art of being present without taking up too much space, was Lisa Kunnel. She was also Jae-hoon's best friend, had been for 10 years. So, Ti-woo placed his champagne down and folded his hands like a man convening a board meeting. Your 10th girlfriend, Seo Yeon, broke up with you. Again, I'm suggesting you should try other types of women, but you think you can't date a black woman. Why? There was a pause. Lisa set her glass down very carefully, observing, waiting for Jae-hoon's answer. Jae-hoon looked at Ti-woo for a moment, then leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man who had rehearsed this answer. That's not something I can see for myself. Ti-woo frowned. Why not? Different worlds, different cultures, different expectations. Jae-hoon's voice was calm, not unkind, just settled. The way someone sounds when they have decided something long ago and stopped questioning it. It's not something I've ever been able to picture. Ti-woo stared at him. Then, very slowly, both of them turned to look at Lisa. Lisa was already looking at Jae-hoon. There was something in her expression that lasted for exactly 1 second before she replaced it with a smile. That 1 second, the flicker of something old and quietly painful, was invisible to Jae-hoon. He never caught those moments. He never had. But Ti-woo did. He always did. So, Lisa said, and her voice was completely even. You're saying that no matter who she was, no matter what she was like, you could not fall in love with a black woman. Jae-hoon shrugged once. That's what I'm saying. Lisa nodded slowly. She looked down at her glass. Then she looked back up, and there was something new in her eyes, something that had crossed the line from feeling into decision. Okay, she said, let's make a bet. Ti-woo sat up straighter. Jae-hoon raised an eyebrow. Bet. 3 dates. Lisa placed her hand flat on the table. You take me on 3 dates, actual dates, and I'll make you fall in love with me. If I succeed, you admit that your wall had nothing to do with culture. If I don't, she smiled, and it was the most effortless, dangerous smile Jae-hoon had ever seen on her face. I'll plan your next trip to Jeju with full itinerary, accommodation, everything. My own money. Lisa. Deal or no deal, Jae-hoon? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Ti-woo, who was already smiling so wide his cheeks were pressed up near his eyes. Jae-hoon turned back to Lisa. He saw his best friend. He saw someone he had known for a decade, through bad haircuts and failed presentations, and 3M phone calls, and the kind of comfort that had no romance in it whatsoever. He could not imagine looking at her and feeling anything his heart hadn't already categorized, filed, and stored safely under friendship. Deal, he said. Lisa smiled. She picked up her glass and took a sip. Under the table, her hand was trembling slightly. Before we begin, if you are the type of person who believes that love has no walls, no conditions, and no expiration date, this story was written for you. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling us what you think is about to happen, and like this video. Because trust me, you are going to want to be part of this community when this story ends. Now, where were we? Kim Jae-hoon was 33 at the time, self-made in the truest sense, the kind of man who had taken a modest family electronics company and tripled it into a tech conglomerate before he was 30. Forbes had called him one of Korea's most formidable young minds. His colleagues called him brilliant. His ex-girlfriends called him emotionally unavailable. As for Lisa, she was 30, a forensic financial consultant who could dismantle corporate fraud the way other people peeled oranges. Casually, precisely, without making a mess. They had been best friends since college, and 10 years later, their friendship still stood strong. That was the reason why Jae-hoon was certain that he would win the bet. There was no way possible that he could ever fall in love with his own best friend. Jae-hoon pulled up in front of Lisa's apartment building on a Friday evening. He had dressed well. He always dressed well. It was less a choice and more a factory setting. And he had made a reservation at Nabu because it was what he knew. Good restaurant, clean lines, reliable evening. He would take her, they would eat, they would talk the way they always talked, and she would see that 10 years of friendship did not bend under the weight of a dress and a dinner reservation. He texted her, "I'm outside." Her reply came 3 minutes later, "I'm coming down." When the building doors opened and she walked out, Jae-hoon's hand paused on the steering wheel. He had seen Lisa in every configuration of herself over 10 years. Post-flight, exhausted, makeup-free, fully glammed for someone else's event, crying over spilled coffee at 7 a.m., laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. He thought he knew every version of her. He did not know this one. Her hair, which had always been a crown of thick, beautiful curls, had been straightened. It fell down past her shoulders in a smooth, dark wave that caught the light as she walked. The dress was midnight blue, simple and perfectly fitted, with a small slit at the hem. She wore heels that gave her exactly 2 more inches of a confidence she didn't need any extra of. Her earrings were long, gold, and they moved when she moved. She walked to the car and opened the door and got in, and for approximately 4 seconds, Jae-hoon said absolutely nothing. "You look," he started. "Thank you," she said simply, settling her seatbelt. She turned to look at him, and there was a calmness about her that was deliberate. "You look nice, too. Let's go." He drove. He kept his eyes on the road, with the focus of a man who was actively choosing where to look. At the restaurant, they were shown to their table, ordered their food, and for the first 20 minutes it was fine. It was them. It was the natural, easy rhythm of 2 people who had shared a language for a decade, interrupting each other, finishing thoughts, laughing at something that required no explanation. Then Lisa set down her fork. "Jae-hoon, oh, don't look at me like your best friend tonight." He met her eyes. "Look at me," she said, "like a woman you are on a date with. You agreed to that." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at her. Really looked. Not the peripheral, comfortable, unconscious way he had looked at her for 10 years. Actually looked. She held his gaze without flinching. They kept talking. They ate. The food was good. The conversation was easy, and there were moments when Jae-hoon forgot entirely that there was a bet involved. He was just there, laughing, engaged, present. Lisa was funny in a way that didn't perform for an audience. She said something about her last client that made him cover his mouth to keep from laughing out loud, and when he finally did, she smiled at him with this particular expression. He had never seen that expression before. It was soft and direct, and it didn't look away. She was looking at him the way a person looks at someone they have decided to stop hiding from. No agenda in it. Just warmth so specific and so concentrated that it almost felt like a hand pressing against his sternum. He felt his heart do something irregular. He looked away. When he looked back, she was already reaching for her glass, as if she hadn't been watching him at all. He found himself thinking, has she always been this beautiful? By the time the bill came, they were both laughing at something that had been genuinely funny, and it took Jae-hoon a full minute to remember that this was supposed to be a date. They had spent 3 hours talking the way they always talked, laughing the way they always laughed, and at no point had either of them reached across the table or leaned in or done anything that wasn't simply them. He felt oddly victorious. Outside, waiting for the car, he looked at her sideways. "See," he said, "I told you this bet wasn't going to work. How am I supposed to see you as anything more than my best friend? It's been 10 years, Lisa. It just isn't there." Lisa looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed, low and easy. "You're so sure of yourself." "I know what I feel." "Jae-hoon." She tilted her head at him, those long earrings moving with the gesture. "We still have 2 more dates." The car arrived. He held the door open for her, and when she slid in and looked up at him with that same quiet, unhurried expression, something in his chest shifted half an inch and settled somewhere new. He ignored it. He got in the car and drove. He was 20 minutes from her apartment when the car made a sound that was entirely the wrong kind of sound. Then it slowed. Then it stopped. Jae-hoon stared at the dashboard. "That's not possible." "What happened?" It was just serviced." He tried the ignition twice. Nothing. He called his driver unavailable for 2 hours, called the service line, 90 minutes minimum. He looked out the window at the sky, which had been clear and uneventful all evening. It was now raining, not politely but with commitment. Lisa looked out at the rain, then she looked at him. Is this the part where we sit here for 90 minutes? There's a hotel. He pointed down the road, a modest lit sign. We can wait there. They made a run for it. The hotel was small and clean and smelled of fresh linen. The woman at the front desk was apologetic. A conference nearby had filled the rooms. They had only one room left. Lisa and Jae-hoon looked at each other. We'll take it, Jae-hoon said. He didn't think much of it. 10 years of friendship included a camping trip where they'd shared a 2-person tent, a flight delay where they'd slept across chairs in an airport lounge, and once, memorably, a single sleeping bag during a power outage in Busan. Sharing a hotel room was nothing. They went up. The room was small but warm. 1 bed, 1 couch. Jae-hoon claimed the couch without discussion while Lisa disappeared into the bathroom. He sat on the couch and answered emails, half listening to the shower running. Then the bathroom door opened. Lisa walked out in a hotel robe, knotted at the waist, her straightened hair now damp and curling slightly at the ends from the rain and the steam. Water traced lines down her neck and jaw. She was scrubbing the back of her hair with a small towel, looking at the floor, completely unself-conscious. Jae-hoon stared. She looked up and found him looking. What? Nothing, he said and looked back at his phone. Then he went to shower. When he came out, he stopped in the doorway. Lisa was in the small kitchenette area, moving with the specific efficiency of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She had clearly found the hotel's minimal provisions and supplemented them with something from her bag. She always carried a small spice kit. He knew that, had teased her about it for years. The room smelled like heat and spice and something deeply, unfamiliarly warm. You didn't order room service, he asked. I wanted to make something. She didn't look up. Sit down. You don't cook for me. I cook all the time. Not for me. Because you always prefer Korean food. He didn't say anything after that. She made pepper soup. Nigerian pepper soup with rice, assembled from what the hotel had and what she'd brought and what she'd apparently sweet-talked out of the kitchen staff with the specific warmth she reserved for strangers she'd decided to charm. She set it in front of him with 2 spoons. He looked at it. The color of the broth was deep and red, steam rising in slow curls. If it's terrible, just say so, she said. He picked up the spoon. He tasted it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he took another spoonful, then another. Lisa sat across from him with her own bowl, watching him from under her lashes without appearing to watch him. He cleared the bowl. He set the spoon down and looked at her. What was in that? He said. Family secret. Lisa. It's pepper soup. She was smiling now, trying not to show the full width of it. It's perfect for rain. My grandmother made it when I was sick. There's a version with catfish and a version with... She stopped and screamed loudly. The kind of scream that happens before thought, a raw spike of genuine terror, and she was off her chair and behind Jae-hoon in under 2 seconds, arms locked around him from behind, face pressed into his shoulder. Jae-hoon looked at the floor. It was a cockroach, making its unhurried way across the tile. Lisa, he said, it's a cockroach. I know what it is. Her voice was muffled by his shoulder. Her grip did not loosen. It's small and it's slower than you. How could you be scared of a cockroach? Please just take it away. He handled it and came back. She was standing at the far end of the room, robe wrapped tightly, arms crossed, looking at the tile with the expression of someone who had survived something significant. She looked up at him. Don't laugh. I'm not laughing. His mouth was very straight. Jae-hoon. I genuinely am not laughing. I can see you not laughing. He sat back down. She came back slowly, still watching the floor. He looked at her, this woman who could dismantle corporate fraud and argue with board executives without raising her pulse, physically retreating from an insect, and something in his chest moved without his permission. Something fond and warm and unexpected. Adorable, he thought, and then caught himself thinking it. Hours later, the rain had not stopped. It had gotten heavier, and lightning was crossing the sky in wide white seams, and thunder followed each one with the kind of sound that settled in your chest. Lisa was on the bed. Jae-hoon was on the couch. The light was off except for the occasional flash of lightning from the window. Jae-hoon. Yes. I can't sleep. I've always been scared of thunder, she said. It wasn't a request, just a statement. Jae-hoon looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he got up, crossed the room, and lay on top of the covers beside her. She turned immediately and rested her head against his chest, and he felt her exhale, the full, slow release of someone who had been holding something tight. He looked at the ceiling. Lightning, thunder, and Lisa flinched slightly at each one. Let me tell you something, he said. What? Stop thinking about the thunder. I'll tell you something. And he told her a story, not a great story, not a crafted one. Something about a ridiculous mistake he'd made during his first year running the company, a crisis meeting where he'd shown up with mismatched shoes because he'd dressed in the dark, and the way his most senior executive had quietly placed a note on his desk saying, left foot, right shoe. It was a small story, a warm one. His voice was low and steady and measured against the sound of rain. Lisa's breathing slowed. He kept talking, softer now, until her breathing told him she was asleep. Then he stopped talking and looked down at her. In the shifting light and dark of the storm, she looked very still and very soft. Her hair was drying in its curls now, the straightening giving way. Her lashes rested on her cheeks. One hand was still loosely curled against his chest. He had been in rooms with beautiful women, many of them, women who were designed deliberately to be looked at, women who wore their appeal like a statement. Lisa was something entirely different. She didn't announce herself. She simply was, and somehow that was more disarming than anything he'd encountered before. He thought about what she'd said at dinner. Don't look at me like your best friend. Look at me like a woman. He looked at her. He thought, maybe I haven't been looking properly. The next morning arrived quietly. No thunder, no lightning, just pale gray light coming through the curtains and the sound of rain that had thinned overnight into something gentle and apologetic. Jae-hoon was already awake when Lisa stirred. He had been awake for a while, actually, staring at the ceiling with the particular expression of a man who has been having a very honest conversation with himself and does not entirely like where it is going. Lisa opened her eyes. She looked at the ceiling. Then she turned her head and found him already looking at her. They stared at each other for exactly 2 seconds. Then Lisa sat up. Good morning. Morning. She stretched, reached for her phone, checked the time. Jae-hoon swung his legs off the bed and reached for his jacket. They moved around the room with the practiced ease of two people who had decided, without discussing it, that last night was simply a night, a circumstance. The kind of thing that happens when cars break down and hotels run out of rooms and storms arrive without warning. Nothing to examine, nothing to file away. They checked out, collected the car. The service team had arrived early, and Jae-hoon drove her home. He dropped her off. She got out, leaned into the open window and said, 2 more dates. He looked at her, still convinced. More than yesterday, she said simply and walked inside. Jae-hoon sat in the parked car for a moment longer than necessary. Then he drove away. 3 days passed. Jae-hoon went back to work. He attended meetings and made decisions and reviewed reports and did all the things that filled his days with motion and purpose. He was, by every observable measure, completely fine. Lisa crossed his mind often, but it was simply as a friend would think of a friend. On Wednesday, he finally texted her. Not about anything, he just typed. About that second date, when should we have it? Her reply came 15 minutes later. I was wondering when you'd ask. Saturday is fine. He smiled at his phone, caught himself smiling and stopped. On Saturday, he was on his way to her building. He had asked what she wanted to do, shopping, a rooftop dinner, the new members-only lounge that had recently opened. He listed the options with the unconscious generosity of a man who was used to throwing access at situations. She replied, I want to go to the park. He had stared at that word for a solid 5 seconds. A park. He had not been to a park before. He texted back, okay, and smiled again. She was already outside when he pulled up. She wore a yellow sundress, flat sandals, her hair back in its curls, fully restored now, big and beautiful and bouncing slightly when she moved. She had a tote bag on one shoulder and she was already walking toward the car with that particular stride of hers, the one that was unhurried but covered ground. She got in. She smelled like shea butter and something floral. The park was busy in the easy, unorganized way that parks on Saturday mornings always are: children running, couples walking, a group of older men playing cards under a wide tree. Jae-hoon parked and got out and looked around with the mild disorientation of a man who has arrived somewhere his money cannot curate. He liked it immediately, the realness of it. Lisa bought ice cream from a vendor near the entrance, chocolate for him without asking, because she knew that was he liked, and they walked. She led him to the activity section of the park with the confidence of a woman who had clearly mapped this out, and what followed was the least billionaire afternoon Jae-hoon had ever had in his adult life. They rode the roller coaster. Lisa threw her hands up at every drop and screamed with her whole chest. Jae-hoon held the rail with one hand and laughed with the other. They did the train ride that circled the park's perimeter, sitting side by side in the small cart, their shoulders touching, Lisa pointing out things as they passed: a dog that was clearly in charge of its owner, a child whose entire ice cream had surrendered to gravity. They played ring toss. Jae-hoon, humblingly, lost 4 times in a row. Lisa won on her second attempt and accepted her small stuffed elephant prize with the dignity of an Olympic medalist. They tried the paddle boats on the small lake. Jae-hoon had been confident about this one and discovered quickly that confidence and paddling were unrelated skills. Lisa navigated. He paddled when she told him to. The boat went where she said. At some point during the paddle boat situation, Jae-hoon looked at her, at the focus on her face, at the way she was squinting against the afternoon light, directing them away from the edge of the lake with small, precise instructions, and he thought, when did she become this person? Not that she hadn't always been this person. He knew she had. But he was seeing her again differently, the way you see a painting differently when someone adjusts the lighting in the room. Nothing in the painting has changed, but everything about how you see it has. By late afternoon, they were on a bench near the lake, shoes off, ice cream melted hours ago. The kind of easy exhaustion that comes from a day spent actually doing things rather than being served them. Lisa leaned back on the bench and looked at the water. I've always wanted to come here with a boyfriend. Jae-hoon turned to look at her. The late light caught her profile and held there. Too bad I ended up coming with my best friend, she said, and smiled sideways at him. He looked at her for a moment. Something quiet moved through him. I'm available, he said, if you ever want to come back. She tilted her head at him. What if you're dating someone by then? Doesn't matter. She was quiet. Then she looked at the water and said, softly, that's not true and you know it. I've noticed how you pull back whenever you're with someone, you distance yourself from me. She paused. I'm sure it's your girlfriends, though. Jae-hoon didn't say anything. Promise me something, she said. What? Promise me that even if we both end up with other people someday, someone for you, someone for me, we stay friends. Jae-hoon looked at her. There was something wrong with the sentence. Not the words were fine, generous, the kind of thing good friends say to each other. But something in his chest reacted to someone for you and someone for me as if the phrase had stabbed him. I promise, he said. She nodded, looking satisfied. He drove her home. Before she got out, she looked at him. One more date. One more date, he agreed. He watched her walk to her door, and his chest did the thing again. Jae-hoon reached out for the 3rd date on a Thursday. He had been thinking about it since Monday. He would not have admitted that to anyone, including himself in the formal sense, but the anticipation had been living somewhere in the back of his head for days. He picked up his phone and typed, 3rd date this weekend. He waited but got no response. He wasn't concerned. Lisa was busy, always had been. Her work took her strange hours and sudden silences were normal. But Friday passed and still nothing. He told himself it was fine. Saturday came and there was still no reply. It was the same on Sunday too. By Monday morning, Jae-hoon was doing something he had never in his adult life done over a delayed text message. He was packing. Ti-woo called at noon, and Jae-hoon picked up on the first ring, which was already a signal. Have you heard from Lisa? He said without greeting. Ti-woo paused. Why? She's not responding. Maybe she's busy. It's been 3 days. Jae-hoon. She always replies. Even when she's in the middle of a case, she always— He stopped, heard himself, and took a breath. I'm going to her place. He was there in 20 minutes. He pressed the buzzer, waited, and was about to press again when the main door opened and a man walked out. Jae-hoon stepped back slightly. The man was tall, well-dressed, easy in his bearing. He held the door politely for Jae-hoon, nodded, and walked past toward a car parked at the curb. He got in with the ease of someone familiar with the parking situation, someone who had been here before, who knew where to put the car. Jae-hoon stood in the doorway of the building and looked at the car pulling away. Then he heard Lisa's voice. She was coming down the stairs, slightly out of breath, like she'd moved quickly. She came through the inner door and stopped when she saw him. Jae-hoon, she called. You haven't been answering my texts. I know, I'm sorry. She didn't look away. Can we talk outside? They stood on the small steps outside the building. The afternoon was warm and still. Lisa's hands were in the pockets of her trousers. Who was that? Jae-hoon asked. She looked at him steadily. His name is Femi. He's my boyfriend. The word landed like a knife pierced into his chest. Jae-hoon looked at her. We've been talking for a while, she said. It moved quickly. She was watching him carefully. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Jae-hoon started and stopped. He cleared his throat. That's fine, that's good. The words came out in the right shape, but something behind them was wrong. What about the third date? Lisa looked at him gently. The gentleness was somehow worse than anything else. I think 2 dates was enough, Jae-hoon. You were right, the bet wasn't going to work. She smiled, and it was soft and real, and he couldn't read it properly. I should focus on Femi now, give it a real chance. He opened his mouth, but she continued. And I think for a while things are new with us, I probably should pull back a little, from hanging out as much. Jae-hoon stared at her. Pull back. Just while we're getting started, you know how it is. He did know how it was. He had done the same thing to her every time with every girlfriend, and she had watched him do it every single time without once making him feel guilty about it. She had promised she understood. She had made space. And now she was asking for the same space, and he could not make himself give it to her without feeling something wild and wrong building in his chest. Right, he said, of course. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she went inside. Jae-hoon stood on the steps. Then it started to rain. He didn't move. The rain came down on his suit and his hair and his shoes, and he stood in it like a man who had been paused, who was waiting for something to tell him what the feeling currently occupying his entire chest cavity actually was. He knew what it was. He just wasn't ready to say it yet. The next week was, professionally speaking, a disaster. Jae-hoon sat through a board meeting on Monday and lost the thread of a presentation he had personally prepared. His deputy, a meticulous woman named Ki-rin, who had worked with him for 5 years and never seen him misplace his focus, sent him a note across the table that said, "Are you all right?" He wrote back, "I'm fine," and then stared at his own handwriting and thought it was the most dishonest word in any language. He called Ti-woo that evening. "Lisa has a boyfriend," he said. There was silence. She called off the third date. She said she's pulling back to spend time with him. He heard his own voice and noticed it had a quality he was not accustomed to, something stripped, something without its usual even surface. Ti-woo said, very carefully, "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know what I feel. That's the problem." Jae-hoon. She was supposed to try to make me fall for her, and instead she just stopped. She got a boyfriend and she just stopped, like it was nothing. He paused again, like I was nothing. Ti-woo was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its usual lightness. "Be honest with yourself. What is this feeling?" Jae-hoon said nothing. "Because from where I'm standing," Ti-woo said, "it sounds like a man who got so comfortable knowing a woman would always be 3 feet away from him that he never thought about what it would feel like when she wasn't." "Get some sleep," Ti-woo said, "and think, Jae-hoon, think about what you're feeling right now." But Jae-hoon did not sleep. He thought about the restaurant and how she'd held his gaze across the table without flinching. He thought about a hotel room and a bowl of pepper soup that was the warmest thing anyone had fed him in years. He thought about the way she'd buried her face in his shoulder over a cockroach and how inexplicably right it had felt to be the person she ran to. He thought about a bench in a park, and someone for you, and the way his chest had tightened at two words that should have been ordinary. He thought about 10 years of her being 3 feet away, 10 years of him looking right at her and not looking at her at all. He lay in his bed at 3 a.m., and the truth arrived with the quiet inevitability of something that had been walking toward him for a very long time. He was in love with Lisa Cunnell, and he had wasted a decade getting there. A message from Ti-Woo arrived on Thursday morning. Jae-hoon was in the middle of a board meeting, actually present this time, forcing himself back to functional, when his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it under the table. It was an invitation, formal, designed, the kind you send for something significant. His eyes found the words engagement celebration and the names, Lisa Cunnell and Femi Ademi. The engagement was today. Jae-hoon read it twice, then he read it a third time. The board meeting continued around him. Someone was talking about an expansion. Jae-hoon stood up suddenly, and the room went quiet. "Clear the rest of the meeting," he said. "We'll reschedule." And like that, he walked out. The venue was a rooftop. The city spread golden below it, and the string lights made everything look like the inside of a dream. And Jae-hoon arrived with his heart in his throat and his jacket slightly disheveled, because he had driven here from the middle of a board meeting and not once thought about whether he looked appropriate. He scanned the room. Ti-Woo found him first. He appeared at Jae-hoon's shoulder with a glass of something, wearing an expression that was warm and unreadable. "You came." "Where is she?" Ti-Woo tilted his head. Jae-hoon saw her. Lisa was across the room, standing with a group of people, laughing at something someone had said. She wore a white dress, something simple and luminous that made her look like the best thing in the room, which she always was, and how had he not ever noticed? Femi stood beside her and said something, and she leaned into him slightly, and Jae-hoon's jaw tightened. He moved before he had finished forming any thought. He crossed the room. People turned as he passed, because Jae-hoon moving with purpose was a thing that drew attention. He reached Lisa. He was directly in front of her, and the group around them felt the shift and went quiet. Lisa looked up and found his eyes. Her expression was still, watching, a hint of something flickering in it that he couldn't quite name. "Jae-hoon," she started. "I can't let this happen." The words came out clear and unplanned and completely honest. "I can't stand here and watch you get engaged to someone else." He took a breath. "I know I was slow. I know I took too long and I said things that were wrong and I had walls I built for no good reason and you had every right to stop waiting." His voice was steadier than he felt. "But Lisa, I'm asking you, please don't do this." There was silence. He kept going, because he had started, and there was no longer any version of this where he stopped. "I'll be better. I'll be better than whatever this is. I'll be better than I've been for the last 10 years. You deserve someone who sees you, really sees you, and I know I haven't, and I am sorry for that. I'm sorry it took me this long." He looked at her. "But I see you now, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure you know that if you give me the chance." The rooftop was very quiet. Then Ti-Woo burst out laughing. A full, helpless, delighted laugh that bent him forward slightly and made several guests step back in alarm. Jae-hoon stared at him. Lisa's eyes had filled with something warm, something that had been held for a very long time and was only now being allowed to exist outside of her. One tear escaped, she let it, then she smiled. And it was the most complete smile Jae-hoon had ever seen on a human face, the kind that has relief in it, and joy, and the specific radiance of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a decade and has just been allowed to set it down. "You lost the bet," she said softly. Jae-hoon blinked. He looked at Ti-Woo, who was still laughing, composing himself now in degrees, wiping his eyes. He looked at the man beside Lisa, Femi, who had taken a small but meaningful step back and was now wearing the unmistakable expression of a man who was an actor who had just completed a very successful performance. Jae-hoon looked back at Lisa. "There is no engagement," she said. Her voice was soft and steady and honest. "Femi is a friend of Ti-Woo's. He agreed to help." She paused. "And Ti-Woo has known about my feelings for you since year 3. Jae-hoon turned to Ti-Woo. Ti-Woo raised both hands. She needed a push. You both did. I just applied appropriate pressure. Jae-hoon looked at Lisa again. The tears were real. The smile was real. The decade behind both of them was real, and it was suddenly, fully visible to him. All 10 years of it, all the times she had been 3 feet away, all the times she had laughed in his direction and then looked away a half-second too slowly. All the times she had shown up quietly and completely and never once made him feel her absence because she had never allowed herself to be absent. He had been the least observant person in his own story. He laughed. It started low and built into something genuine and slightly undone. The laugh of a man who has been outwitted by the people who love him most, and he covered his face with one hand for a moment and then dropped it. You set me up, he said. I needed to know, Lisa said simply. I needed to know if it was actually there, or if I'd been hopping for something that was never going to. It's there, he said. She looked at him. Lisa, his voice dropped, just hers now, just this. It has been there. I was just too dense and too convinced of my own certainty to see what was right in front of me. He stepped closer. I don't care that you tricked me. I am standing here on a rooftop in the middle of what I now understand was an elaborate operation, and the only thing I feel is grateful, because you cared enough to try, and because I got here. He searched her face. Even if it took me 10 years and a fake engagement to do it. Lisa laughed through the tears. It was the laugh he knew best, the one that crinkled the corners of her eyes and had no performance in it. He opened his arms, and she stepped into them. And when he held her, it felt like the most overdue thing in the history of the world, like something that had been waiting for one of them to finally open the door. Jae-hoon finally asked her properly. Not immediately. He gave it 3 days, because he wanted to be deliberate about it, wanted it to be something she would remember not as the aftermath of a dramatic rooftop scene, but as something that belonged entirely to the two of them. He took her to a quiet restaurant, a small Nigerian-Korean fusion place he had found specifically, a restaurant that existed right at the intersection of both of them, which seemed right. They ate, they talked the way they always talked. They laughed at the same things they had always laughed at. It was, as it had always been, completely easy. At the end of the meal, the waiter arrived with the dessert plate. Lisa looked down at it. Written in chocolate, in Jae-hoon's careful handwriting, were 5 words. Can I be your boyfriend? She looked up at him. He was watching her with the expression of a man who had, for possibly the first time in a significant personal situation, no certainty about the outcome. The confidence was real, but so was the asking. She looked back down at the plate. She looked back up. Yes, she said, and her whole face said the rest. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning that smelled like shea butter and coffee, Lisa Kunnell and Kim Jae-hoon got married. Not with fanfare, not with Forbes in attendance, with Ti-Woo crying before the ceremony had even started, and a small gathering of people who had watched them circle each other for a decade and had been waiting, with the patience of people who believe in eventual things, for them to finally arrive. Jae-hoon held her hand during the ceremony and thought about a hotel room in the rain, about a bowl of pepper soup, about a cockroach and a storm and a bench in a park, and every small moment that had quietly been building something he'd been too certain of his own limits to recognize. Lisa held his hand and thought about 10 years. 10 years of loving someone from 3 feet away. 10 years of waiting for him to look. He was looking now, and he would spend the rest of his life looking. And that is what happens when you stop letting your walls write your story for you. Lisa didn't give up. She didn't convince him with perfection. She let him see her, and that was enough. That has always been enough. If this story moved you even a little, do us a favor. Hit subscribe. We have more of these coming, and you don't want to miss a single one. Leave a comment below and tell us, which moment got you? Was it the pepper soup, the fake engagement, or was it when he stood up in the middle of that board meeting and walked out? Like this video so more people find it. Share it with someone who needs to believe that the right person sometimes takes a long time to look up. If you're new here, tell us where you're watching from so we can welcome you. We'll see you in the next story.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I hope you enjoyed the story. Please support by subscribing and commenting what you enjoyed about the story and where you're watching from. Ciao!